So thank you for joining us on Let the Healing Begin podcast. I am your host, Asia. And today we have June Collins on with us. How are you doing, June?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. So without further ado, so whereabouts are you from?
I am in Hayhira, Georgia. I'm about 30 minutes away from the Florida line,
Okay.
straight down in the middle.
Okay.
So,
Born and raised there?
no. I moved here in 1993 with my family. We're originally from Broward County, Pompano Beach, Florida.
Okay. How you like Georgia?
Yeah, for the most part, it's really laid back. It's not a big city at all. And I like that aspect of it, but you have to want to live here because it's different. It's different. I went from a city girl to a country girl, and it was different. It was a time figuring myself out after I moved here.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So like growing up in Florida,
Mhm.
how was that? What was your childhood like for you?
In Florida, it was good. It was a little different because when I was growing up as a child, it was in the 80s. And so at that time, and I don't know if you remember it, but back at that time, it was more of they were snatching kids. I don't know if you remember that. So being in a big city like Pompano, it was more of, hey, you can ride your bike from, this part of the sidewalk to this part of the sidewalk, but no further where I can see you. And that was different. But I mean, I had pretty much a normal childhood. To keep us out of trouble when we were living in Florida. My parents put us in a lot of sports. So we were always doing sports every weekend and during the week. And then I also took art classes. I was big into painting back then. And so down there, I mean, it was good. It was just you didn't get to go out and play like in Georgia. But you still were doing something. And it was good. It was really good. And like where we lived, like everybody always had a block party. I don't know if anybody remembers their parents in the 80s, but it was always grilling somewhere, or they were doing the drinking and all the kids played together, and then everybody could walk home or whatnot. But yeah, I mean, it was good. It was good.
So let me ask you this. So what kind of sports did you play?
Okay, so I did gymnastics and I did cheerleading, and then I played soccer and baseball. I played a little bit of basketball, but that wasn't. I'm 5 foot, so that like was out of my realm. I mean, I'm not a basketball player. I ended up like when we were young, we were in like a lot of different things. Whatever they had, my mom would sign us up for. But I ended up doing cheerleading. In the end, I ended up doing cheerleading and I did soccer. And I cheerleading was all right. I just didn't. We would we would do like all this practice and everything for competition and stuff like that, and it was kind of crazy because you know you did all this competition, and you did everything you possibly could to get ready for it, and then you would get like third place or you wouldn't place. So that was kind of rough for me.
Mhm.
But it was all right. I mean, oops, sorry about that.
No, you're
But
fine.
it was cool. But I ended up, my mom was like, if you're going to do a boys sport, which soccer back then was a boys sport, it was mostly guys playing in
Hmm.
the 80s. And she was like, you're going to do a girl sport. So my girl sport was cheerleading. I didn't do great in gymnastics. So
Hmm.
I was like, I'll just do cheerleading and soccer. And that's what I did.
Okay. So do you have siblings?
Yes, I have an older stepbrother and a stepsister, and but we grew up kind of like, brother and sister, and then I have a little brother as well.
Okay. And did you guys all get along growing up?
Yeah, me and my younger brother, it was usually just me and my younger brother because my mom had been married previously. So there was like a difference between the older siblings and the younger siblings of 10 years.
Okay.
So by the time that we reached a little bit older, they were out of the house. I can, my older brother, from the earliest memories I have of he was always out of the house. So I don't even remember him living with us. Obviously he did. And then my sister, I remember her living a few years with us, and then she went off and did her own thing.
Okay. Now let me ask you this. Well, now, what's your relationship? What was your relationship like with your parents?
Um, Me and my dad, we had a really good relationship. I'm a daddy's girl, and always will be. My mom, it was a little bit different. Obviously, I went over there and I saw her every day. I talked to her every day and stuff like that. But my mom had an alcohol problem. It was We knew not to talk to her after like 9 p.m. And it obviously when you're growing up, you just know when not to talk to them. But it was just if you did, she was one of those angry alcoholic. I call her an alcoholic, but she was one of those angry individuals, and scream, and just total negativity. And so it was touch and go. I love my mom. She did great. She passed away in July of last year. But it was different. It just depended on the day, and it depended on her mood. I think that she taught me a lot of valuable things. Um, she did teach me how to be strong, and I mean, there's a lot of good things too. But I mean, it was touch and go for a long time.
Yeah, I'm sorry about the loss of your mom.
No, no problem.
Um, Now, like with the alcohol and stuff. Now, let me ask you this, if you don't mind me asking.
Mhm.
Was it the alcohol that she passed away from?
No, no, she actually had a heart issue. It was kind of weird. Like, she went into the hospital because was having stomach issues, and it turned out it was her heart. She only had like 23% usage of her heart, and eventually she just, one day she just, I guess you could say, kind of passed out, and then that was it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So did she ever get clean?
No, no, she slowed down a lot when she found out about her heart issues. She did slow down a lot, but she never totally stopped
Mhm.
drinking alcohol. I mean, she might have like the 2 weeks before she passed or something like that, but I mean, she was still drinking.
Yeah. Um, so like how was it with your teen years, with having a no, let me back up some. So with your mom drinking and stuff like that, how did your stepdad handle that?
He was my dad. He was my biological dad.
Okay.
I've always lived with my biological dad, but um, my dad is very relaxed anyway. So he just kind of let her do her own thing, because it was to the point where I can either let her do the whole thing, let her do her thing, or she's going to scream and yell at me. So he dealt with a lot of that by himself. He you know, I felt horrible when I moved out, because I was the last one. Well, I had a younger brother, but he had already moved. But I felt horrible moving out just because he had to deal with it. But he just kind of let it go, and if he would say something, she would get angry at him about it. So he just kind of let it go, and just did his own thing, and tried not to, I'm gonna say, piss her off whenever
Yeah.
whenever she was like that. He knew after a certain time just not even to deal with it. You know what I mean? Don't even try right now.
Yeah. So when you finally moved out, ouch. Um, what did that look like for you?
I actually I was 20 when I
Okay.
moved out. So when I was 20, I bought my first house. And obviously the opportunities here in Georgia are easy. I mean, I and it hasn't been that long ago. I mean, it's been a long time ago, but it hasn't been that much long ago. But I only paid like, 43,000 for my house. There was just so many opportunities. So I moved out and bought a house. And it I mean, it was good, but I had one thing. We were talking about my mom. One thing, um, I bought my house, and then I was getting married too. And I can do write a whole book on marriage and how bad it is. But when I moved out, when I was going to move out, my mom did not want me to move out until after I got married. And so I was paying for a house and not living in it because that's what my mom wanted. And it was that time frame where your parents paid for the wedding and all of this. And she refused to. Now we had already sent everything out, but she had refused to pay for the wedding if I moved out. And it's just that hold, that little last hold she could have on me, I think.
Mhm.
And yeah, so I was paying for a house and not actually living there. And yeah, it was rough. It was a rough time. But I think it was her last hold on me. But once I did move out, obviously that marriage only lasted 7 months. And I'm sure, as I look back at it now, I mean, years later, I see that I shouldn't have married that person anyway, but I think in my mind at the time, I knew I could get out. And I was, even though I was a strong female and I did a lot of things that people wouldn't think that I could do, I still was scared to be by myself. Uh,
Yeah.
I was scared to live a life and be able to take care of myself by myself. I always thought I needed somebody. And I think that goes back to everything that I've been through. It's just, you think you need somebody and you really don't, and it's all part of that psychological stuff.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this. How long were you paying for that house and not living in it?
Probably about 5 months, 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah, almost, at least half a year I was paying for it.
Mm.
And yeah, I wasn't living in it. Obviously, whenever you buy a house, you want to paint it the way you want it painted and you want to do the floors the way you want to do it. So I was doing that, but every night I would have to go home to my parents' house.
Wow.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah.
So after you divorced, after you got divorced and things like that, so what happened in your life next?
So at the time I was working at like I think JC Penney's when I got divorced. I was working at JC Penney's. And so I basically, was on my own. But it goes back to that whole thing that I thought I needed somebody. And I want to say within a year, I had already married someone else.
Mhm.
Just to have somebody there to help me because I felt like I needed help. Um, and I probably met that individual maybe maybe 2 months after my divorce was final, you
Mhm.
know. But I had from the time I was at JC Penney's, I had applied and for a law enforcement job. And I was like, you know what, this is, I can do this. So, I did it. And I think it was the whole thing. I'm female. I can do it. You know what I mean? And I want to prove it to the world. And it's so weird too, because I was putting off this image that I was this strong female, but
Mhm.
I was so scared inside that I couldn't even be by myself. Um, it's so weird how it was, but everybody in the world thought I was this strong person. It's
Now let me
weird.
ask you this. Did you back then, like, did you feel like you couldn't be by yourself, or like, is it the now looking back?
Back then, I didn't. Back then, it was like, "Oh, I'm in love," But now that I look back now, I could not. For me, it was me thinking that doing it on my own, I always felt like I needed somebody. I had to have, I say a man, I had to have a man right there. He had to take care of me, and that wasn't the case, but that's what I felt back then. Now that I look at it now, I mean, that's what I felt, was like I always had to have a man, and I didn't see it then, but I see it now.
Yeah. Okay. So, um, so when you got like remarried and stuff, was
Mhm.
it really different from your first marriage? Were you like how did that go?
Um, it was very so I met the second guy and I was still working at, just I don't think I was at JC Penney's. I think I was working at LA Weight Loss at the time. But um, I went from working a job that was basically 9 to 5 to a law enforcement job once I married him.
Mm.
So obviously the hours, it's shift work, it's overnight work, and I'm sleeping when he's up and everything, and it got um really bad. It started getting, you're cheating on me, and he was following me around when I was on shift, and I
Wow.
mean, it was just really weird. And and I understand he married one person, and then here comes another person that he wasn't expecting. I understand that, and it's not for everybody to marry someone in law enforcement. But it got bad. It got to the point where it's like you want to sleep with one eye open because you don't know what's going to happen. Obviously, there was a lot of yelling and stuff like that, but it wasn't abusive.
Okay.
But there was a lot of yelling in the house, and it got to the point where it's like, something is going to escalate eventually, and I ended up getting a divorce again.
Wow. I can't believe he was following you while you were working. Like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah, and obviously in law enforcement, there are a lot of women in it now.
Mhm.
Um, but there is still so many more men to every woman that's in there. So I never worked with a female. Um, all my beat partners were men. Everybody on my shift was men except me, which was no big deal because I was considered one of the guys. But um, it was rough for him to understand that, these are my beat partners, it's nothing more, and it was hard for him to realize that.
Now, let me ask you this. How long after you guys got married did he start becoming insecure?
Um, God, I don't think we were married over much over a year, so probably within 8 months. It
Wow.
started at first when I decided that, because obviously I got hired with the police department, and then I had to go to the police academy. And there was one other person I went to the police academy with, and she was a girl. So that didn't bother him. And then after I finished the police academy, then when I started working shift work and overnight work, that's when it started to happen. So I would say uh, when I got on the road, within 3 months, probably.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you think it was due to um like him being with someone prior to you and they were like they had some infidelity issues, or he just was an insecure person?
No, absolutely. So, when he was with his previous wife, she had infidelity issues.
Mm.
So, I know a lot of it came from that. A lot of
Yeah.
it did come from that. Hmm.
Yeah, and it's so hard to not make the person that we're currently with pay for the mistakes of our past. It's just because when we are hurt in those ways, we just kind of throw this wall up, and then we are, thinking the person that we're with, oh, they must be doing this. They have to be, and it's just
Oh
sad
yeah.
because we make the people that are not, guilty of why we're hurting, we actually hurt them. Like, what do they say? Hurt people,
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
know?
And I think we do it, and we don't even realize we're doing it too half the time.
Yeah.
And I know that I've been like that before.
Mm,
It's part of it, and I think you have to grow, you have to get past it. But some people stay stuck there, and they stay stuck in that spot where, hey, I can't get over, you know the cheating, the infidelity, or whatever it was. I can't get over it, and I'm not going to trust anybody. And that's the sad part. That's the sad
yeah,
part about it.
absolutely. So after you guys divorced, did you continue in law enforcement, or how did that go for you?
I did. I'm actually still in law enforcement today.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes, totally different.
Mm,
Totally different. I'm just a paper pusher now, but, and I enjoy, like, the financial crimes and stuff like that, but, yeah, I started in law enforcement in 2005, and I've stayed with it since. And, one thing about Georgia, you have a lot of opportunities here, but there's also not a lot of jobs that pay great. And law enforcement has been able for me to um, do everything I've wanted to do, and it's allowed me to support my family. And so yeah, I've still still remained in law enforcement. Obviously, I started on like a patrol, like like your regular cops. If you call, they'll come to your house, and then I it goes back to I had to prove myself. I thought I had to prove myself when I was younger.
Mhm,
And so I got on a tactical squad called the Power Squad,
mhm,
where I live. And basically they just went to high crime areas and just, you know, enforce the laws. And then I went to a drug task force. I worked for a drug task force for years, until it closed. I worked for it until they closed, and then now I'm working for the state, and I'm a supervisor over a bunch of special agents. So it changed when I think it's changed with what I do now because I know I don't have to prove myself. But back then I thought I had to prove myself. I'm like this, 5 foot, and at the time I weighed 110 pounds. I have to prove myself, and I thought I had to prove myself, and I thought I had to, be that strong woman,
mm,
and now I look back at it, it's like, I didn't have to do all that stuff. You know what I mean? Like they respected me for who I was, just because of who I am, and they all liked me. But back then it was like I had to prove myself. I thought I had to prove myself anyway.
yeah. So, um, now let me ask you this, like, okay, so after that divorce, how long, like, because I know that would like had to be hurtful, we marry and then divorce and then marry someone else, thinking that okay, this has to be it. Like, was the divorce hard for you, and how did you come back from that, like, mentally and emotionally?
Um, I think for me, for I think the first and the second time, it was a relief, I think. But at that time, I still thought it was them and not me. I thought that it was their issues and not my issues. Now, don't get me wrong, they had issues themselves, but at that time, it was just like, well, I'm getting divorced. It doesn't matter because it's their issue, not me. You know, so when I got that second divorce, it didn't phase me. It was like, okay, I'm nervous about having to take care of myself, but you know, it's still it's him, not me. It's all his fault.
Yeah. And a lot of times it feels like that, until we like grow out of a situation or grow out of, like our old selves.
Mhm.
And so we can look back and see, what the real problem is. And not to say, it's one sided or anything like that. Um,
Mhm.
so after you got divorced, what would you how were you living your life then? Because you were by yourself,
Mhm. So, I was doing the going out with my friends all the time and doing the drinking and
Mhm,
just kind of living the single life.
mhm,
Um, I was at the time I was on like a bunch of dating apps and stuff, and I was just living that life for a while. I lived that life for a while, you know, just living the single life, just
mhm,
hanging out with all cops and just going from there.
mhm. And what was it? Would it be crazy like hanging out with your coworkers? Like what to like on the in your at home life, but hanging out with coworkers?
Mhm. It wasn't really crazy, because, obviously the coworkers that I hung out with, they were either, single as well, or them and their wife like to go out. And I say them and their wife because I didn't work with any females, but, so it wasn't that crazy. We had that trust, obviously, with us, so they were like friends. And when I was in especially back then, when I was in that patrol and in that agency, like we spent so much time together anyway. It was like those became my friends. Those became the people that I trusted the most and everything like that. So no, it wasn't crazy.
Now, let me ask you this, and this is kind of jumping all over the place, but so like in the midst of those marriages, right?
Mhm.
Had you ever thought, like coming out of them, had you ever been glad, like, I'm glad that no kids were birthed from these situations?
Yeah, so up until I was 28, 29 years old,
Hmm.
I didn't want to have kids. Like that was like my mind, and it started from when I was in high school. So it wasn't like something just because of the husbands,
Hmm.
but when I was growing up and when I was in those two marriages, I was like, I'm not going to have kids. That's just not meant for me.
Hmm.
I don't need to raise kids. I didn't think that I was responsible enough. I didn't think that I would be able to give them what they needed. So yeah, I'm totally glad like children didn't, but when I married them, they knew that I did not want kids.
Did they feel the same way?
No, I think both of them wanted kids, and I think in the back of their mind, they hoped that one day I would change my mind.
Hmm.
Because I was still so young. They thought, well, maybe one day when she gets, and then this is me thinking it, but maybe one day she'll change.
Hmm.
If that's what they were thinking or not, but I'm guessing that was the case because of the fact that they both wanted kids and I didn't want kids.
Yeah. So, um, like, how long were you single before you found? Well, you were like looking for. Were you actively looking for, like, to date, or were you kind of just hanging out and just doing your own thing, and like as a single?
No, I was still trying to find Mr. Right because, I thought that I needed him. But I was enjoying my single life too,
Mhm.
so I was dating several different people. I wasn't just dating one person, and I would go out on a date with them. If I didn't like them, I wouldn't go back out with a date with them. But I was still dating because I felt like I needed someone there. It
Mhm.
was still the same. I had to have somebody there.
What do you feel? What do you think? What do you feel like you were missing?
Um, I don't know what I thought that I was missing, but I think that I thought I could not take care of myself and that I had to have somebody there telling me, I guess what to do, but not really what to do, because if they would have told me what to do, I would have bit their head off at that time. But just somebody there and somebody constant. I guess that's the only thing I can think of is that I had to have somebody. Um that I felt that that was natural, and I don't know why I felt like that, and I don't know if it has to do with anything with my childhood or what, because when I look back at my childhood, my mom and obviously my dad were always like, you can do anything, you're a very strong person, and my mom used to say bullheaded, you're gonna be fine. They always said that to me, so I don't know where it came from. The
Mhm.
insecure I say it's insecurity, like, I felt insecure that to be somebody, I had to have somebody by my side versus
Mhm.
be by myself.
Now, let me ask you this. Do you think possibly because you're used to like growing up in a two-parent household, so it's normal to have two people in a house? You think that
Mhm.
could have contributed?
It could have, I think it could have, and I still wonder to today because I've been to like one therapy session and never really went back, but I'm wondering if it has something to do with my childhood and my mom being the way she was.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know for sure, but and it might be because I grew up in a two-parent household and someone was always there. Um, but I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know.
And you know what? Like, it's some things that I wonder about too. I think that our childhoods have like a greater effect on us than what we really realize. Like,
Yes.
and not just speaking like, to at you or anything like that, but I think for all of us, like, um, things that happen like as we're kids, it pretty much like shapes us and molds us. Even the
Yeah.
subconscious things, like things that we don't even realize have taken place or are taking place. It's like, and it's hard to readjust from that. Like, it's some things in my life, because like you said, your mom was it was like hit and miss with her. It was the same way in my home as well.
Yeah.
So some days she will be really mean, some days she will be okay. And Kind of when the attitude got stirred up, we're like, okay, don't talk to her, first she don't get
Mhm.
her started,
Yeah, I know exactly.
And so now, like with my son, it's like even I try to have more patience with him due to, knowing how I felt back then,
Yeah,
So it's just like, and even like sometimes, it is hard not to yell at your kids, but I don't do it all the time. But even when I do it, the here and there, it's like, it's always, I'm always thinking like, let me not do that,
yeah.
and
That's
he
like with my
takes it.
daughter, I do the same thing, and some days I'm just like, "Oh, Jesus, please help me, this child." And then, like, other days, it just comes out, and
Mhm,
I can give you an example. The other day, I was sitting there talking, she was doing gymnastics. My daughter actually likes gymnastics. She hated soccer when I put her in it, and, she couldn't do something, and, she's just like, "I can't do it, I can't do it," and it drives me nuts when she puts all those negative thoughts in her head.
mhm,
Um, and I lost it, and I I upset her because if you get your voice louder with her, she's just, you don't have to spank her. You just, that loud voice and that firmness, it makes her upset. And, but it just drove me crazy. And I'm like, I can't, how how in the heck can I be the way I am and I have not taught you yet that you have to be more positive than negative,
mhm.
and I just lost it. And I think as parents is we're gonna have those times. Sometimes we can and sometimes, sometimes we can withhold and then sometimes we can't. I it's just part of being a parent. And I think back then, like with your mother and my mother and our dads, they did the best they could,
Mhm.
because the way that I look at it is if I go back and look at the way my parents, my grandparents parented, my dad and my mom. I mean, his dad believed in whipping that tail and whipping the tail to the point where, man, that might be child abuse. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? But
yeah,
that's the way it was. And I think that as generations go on, that we take those times and then when we go forward, we're like, okay, I'm not gonna do this. But it doesn't mean that we're not gonna slip up sometimes.
absolutely. And
Mhm.
it's everything is like learning,
Mhm.
all those parenting manuals, none of them really work because it's just no two
Yeah.
days are the same, no 2 days are
Mhm.
the same, especially with kids, they have their ways.
Oh,
And we
yeah.
have ours, sometimes I
Mhm.
want to be the kid, like, so
Yeah. Yeah,
uh,
when we were younger, we thought the age we are now was so old and they were so grown, and now I'm like, "Okay, I still feel like I'm a kid, like, I'm still trying to figure out life," you know?
I know. I'm asking myself and sometimes my son is, looking at me and I'm like, I know I still got some growing up to do. Like, it's
Yeah.
just crazy.
Yeah, it's great though because they fear us. I say fear us, but they think that we're this great adult, but it's just
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I'm losing it too like you are, hon," but it is
Right.
what it is.
Right. So let me ask you this. So being out dating, at what point did you like find Mr. Right? I mean, or bump into somebody that you like when did you bump into your next relationship?
It was about 6 months in,
Mhm.
um, into my singlehood, I guess you could say. I met my 3rd husband on I think I met him on Facebook, if I remember correctly. I'm almost positive I met him on Facebook. And, he was in the military because we live in a military town. Well, right next to us, like, Valdosta is the big city that is around us, and we have a military base, and he was in the military, and he was trying to meet people in the area because he didn't know anybody because he was originally from Wisconsin. And, so I met him, and then it became, um and the military's the same way. They all go out drinking together and they all hang out together and they're all bros and all that crap. So then it was just kind of like well, him and I and his military friends and my cop friends, they all went out together. And it's kind of strange because military people don't obviously always like cops, and then cop people don't always like military people, but like our friends got along.
That's good. So where'd you guys meet at? You said, oh, on Facebook, and then you
Yeah.
just meet people. So what sparked it? Like, what made is it the actual hanging out and you guys just like dove in deeper, or like were you already like had it reached a romantic space, and then you guys started hanging out?
No, no, we would go out and I think we both wanted to kind of feel it out and see, if we were a match, I guess you could say.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, we just clicked. We had a good time together. We had I think out of my first and second husband, I think that I really thought he was the one and that I would be with him for the rest of my life. And we got along really well for a long time. Or I say it was a long time. Remember, my time frames are short, but um we did we really liked each other and we really enjoyed each other's company.
That's good. So how long were you guys married, and what did that look like? What like how was life with him?
Okay, so we got married in 2009 and we ended up getting divorced in 2012. Um It was good. It was really, really good. He had his career and I had my career, and he was very accepting of me as a law enforcement. I think that also helped. He
Mm.
understood. And just like with me, like with him, I understood deployments and I understood that, sometimes it's late nights and sometimes it's shift work. And it was really good for a long time. And we did, like I said, it was great. In
Mhm.
2008, I actually lost my grandfather.
Mhm.
And once I lost my grandfather, I felt safe and secure with him. And I was like, you know what? We're getting married. I want to have a kid. And that kind of that kind of goes to I felt so comfortable with him.
Mm.
And we decided to have okay, let's have a kid. And we decided to get pregnant. And obviously we got married and then we got pregnant immediately after we were married. I was actually pregnant on our wedding day when I didn't even know it. And yeah, so I we decided to have a kid together. And it was um it was good. We were both excited about having a child. It was both our first child, and it was going to be a boy. I always wanted a boy. From the time I got pregnant to I was like, I want a boy, I want a boy, and it was going to be a boy. And it was just, I mean, we were, living on 5 acres and with the house that we had built, and we were going to have this family, and we had the dogs, and it was like this little fairy tale that we made up that we were gonna have. And then, when he was born, I started having complications at about, um, 34 weeks in the pregnancy, and they kept having to stop my pregnancy because I kept going into preterm labor. And eventually at 35 weeks and some change, I had a complete placental abruption. And obviously I lived, he lived, but even though he lived, he had a lot of complications. And he was special needs. He had a seizure disorder, he had cerebral palsy, he had microcephaly, he had cortical blindness, and it was all from the placental abruption and um, him not breathing, when he was, for so long in my stomach because I had the placenta abruption. And so we became a family of we thought we were going to live this grand normal life, and it became we're a family with a special needs kid, which is not a problem. It was we're going to give him whatever he needs. He's going to do everything. But it also was a problem for us because when you have a special needs kid, um, I was the person that was like, we're gonna push him, we're going to have him do everything he possibly can, and we're not gonna listen to the doctors. And my third husband was, this is the limit that they're saying that he can do. Um,
Mm.
let's not overexert him. I don't want to push him and make him, I'm gonna say sick, that might not be the word. Two
Mhm.
different ways of thinking, which is either way is fine. I mean, I can see both sides now, but back then it started to put a strain on our relationship.
Let me ask, and that's what I was going to ask you. With you guys having two totally different views, would that clash?
Mhm.
And I can only imagine. Um, so let me ask you this. So I know you kept going into preterm labor,
Mhm.
like immature, I mean immature labor. Um, do you think that some of the complications stem from that, or was it strictly from the placental abruption?
It was from the placental abruption. It definitely was from the placental abruption. So basically, when that happens, your placenta rips away from your wall, and
Mhm,
whenever that happens, obviously the baby's not breathing.
mhm,
And we went to the hospital at 10 because I thought I was just in labor again. Um, so we went to the hospital at 10, and I guess at that time it was tearing away because I was bleeding, but they didn't get him out. They didn't do an emergency C-section, and he was born at 1 a.m. So if you do the math, it's just like I have no idea how I'm alive and he's alive because I was bleeding starting at 10. But it was from that. It was so long with him not getting oxygen.
mhm,
And they actually did the doctor that actually delivered him. Um, or I say the doctor, the pediatrician, there was one that delivered him, and then the pediatrician that worked on him actually sent him to Atlanta, Atlanta, Georgia, and they have like a huge NICU there at Grady Memorial Hospital, and they put him on what's called a cooling blanket.
mhm,
And basically, what it does is it takes the body temperature down to hypothermia levels and
mhm.
allows the brain to somewhat repair itself.
Wow.
So he did do that for him, so he could do a lot of things that they thought he would not be able to do, like, one thing I can think of off the top of my head was they didn't think he was gonna be able to regulate his body temperature, and that he would have to wear a vest to regulate his body temperature, but he actually was able to. Um, but yeah, I think all of it had to deal with, his birth.
Let me ask you one more thing, and then we'll move on. What was it that made you keep going into premature labor?
Um I wouldn't, not really sure. I I wasn't bedridden, like, they never told me to be bedridden or anything like that.
Mhm,
So, yeah, I really don't know. I know my mom had us early, and I don't know if maybe it was something like that. Um, but yeah, I mean, they didn't have me bedridden or anything like that.
okay. So after you had your baby, how long was he in the hospital for?
3.5 weeks. He was up in Grady for 3.5 weeks. So we actually had him. Um, he was born on Thanksgiving in
Wow.
2009, and he stayed in the hospital. And I can't remember if it was December 23rd, which was Brian, my third husband's birthday,
Mhm.
or if it was the 24th, the Christmas Eve. I can't
Aw,
remember which day he actually came home, but yeah, he stayed in the hospital the whole time. It was like 3.5 weeks.
aw. And so let me ask you this, like those 3 weeks, those 3.5 weeks that he was in the hospital, did they give you guys training? Did they send in specialists to help you? Like what was that like?
Yeah, so when your baby's in a NICU, they have a team of doctors that come in
Hmm.
and they evaluate your child, and then together they decide what's the best route for him. So when he was in the hospital, he had bleeding on the brain, and so that was causing him to have seizures. So then, once they evaluated that, they did all the tests for it. So it was like I will say it's a lot of testing. They did a lot of testing, and at the time they were doing his testing, they realized he had the seizure disorder, so they put him on medication for seizures. He They realized that he could regulate his body temperature. They did. I'm trying to think of everything that they did. They did a whole bunch of testing. Eventually, he couldn't eat, and at the time we didn't know why, but he couldn't eat as much as they were wanting him to eat. And later down the road, we realized that his flapper was not formed correctly.
Mm,
There's a flapper in your throat, so it was going into his lungs.
mm,
So anyway, at the time they put in an NG tube, and to later put in a what they call a Mickey button, which is the tube that goes in your stomach.
mm,
Um, so they taught us how to the NG tube. They taught us how to put it in.
mm,
If it did come out, because sneezing could make them come out, obviously.
mm,
They taught us that. They gave us we had to do CPR and first aid, which both of us were, but they still wanted us to take it with them because it was just specifically to infants.
mm.
We took that. There was just like a whole bunch of training that we did, and there was just like a whole bunch of testing that they did on him to try to figure out what he could and could not do.
Mm. So when you got home, well, be prior to going home, like because I know with this being your first kid and then your baby being special needs, how did you feel? Were you scared?
Um, yeah, I'm sure I was
Mm,
scared. I was scared because it was a child,
mm,
because I had to take care of this little tiny thing, because he was only like 5 pounds. So we had to take care of him, and he was like a little thing. But then it also worried us because we got all the talks while we were there, because the doctors always give you, I think, the worst examples, or the worst case scenario. And it was, one day they told us while we were in the hospital, one day he was going to fall asleep and never wake up. And they were trying, I think they were trying to, say, hey, it's not going to be roses, but like the way they said it, it was just kind of like, oh, well, that's horrible. But um it's something that stayed with us, and I think that was really nerve-wracking to us too.
mm. So
Yeah.
like once you got home, and everything like that, was it because I know like it just has to be challenging. First of all, having a newborn baby, like it's challenging
Mhm.
within itself. Um, so how was that? And do you feel like you had the like with your husband, do you feel like you had the support that you needed to try to take care of this child?
Oh yeah. Yeah, Brian, my third husband, was an excellent dad. I could not have asked for a better dad than him. Um, it was trying though, because we were both very tired, and with Caleb as well. A few months into it, he couldn't keep his food down. He kept throwing up, and we thought the pediatrician, they thought it was the formula, and come to find out was like he could not, he had real bad acid reflux too. So which in turn he was throwing up his food. So we had to have surgery for that, and ended up he had to be on a feeding tube. So he had his feeding tube, and then he had a pump that would basically keep pumping food into him over a period of time, instead of him eating it all at one time, because if he would eat it all at one time, he would throw up. So once we figured out that, that was fine, and then they switching his seizure medicine. There was stuff going on with that, just trying to regulate life was extremely stressful. And you had physical therapy, occupational therapy. At the time, we didn't know that Caleb had cortical blindness at that time, but just regulating it, and just being parents of a first time as well, is waking up in the middle of the night, when before you could go to sleep and sleep as long as you wanted to, having to wake up, having to feed them, having to figure out what the crying was for. It was really scary. I think, well, not scary, I'd say it's stressful. It was extremely stressful at the time, trying to figure out what he needed and what was exactly wrong with them, because obviously kids can't tell you.
Right. And with like having a newborn baby with both of you guys trying to work, do you feel like that ever put a strain on your guys' marriage at all? Like would it ever go there?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, because it became, and we both were extremely fine with it, but just became what did Caleb need versus the need for us.
Mhm,
And I think it was even stronger, for us because we were dealing with a special needs child.
mhm,
And his with him and all his needs, he would wake up several times during the middle of the night and just want comfort, or just because he was getting fed all over, over the night, overnight. So it's not like he needed food or a diaper change or anything like that. It was um just his needs became before us. And it just that's just the way it was. And we were both okay with it because, we wanted it what was best for him.
mhm. So let me ask you this, like with the doctor saying that he would go to sleep and not wake up again, um, I know that had to be some extra stress too. Like every single time he would sleep, and would I know that will put like constant fear in you guys. How would you manage, like, you know, I know it was stressful.
Mhm.
How would you manage? Or like, would you find yourself checking on him constantly, like if he's sleep and stuff like that?
So they make really expensive baby monitors that actually have, like, you can see on them.
Mm,
And I think we bought the most expensive baby monitor that had we could zoom it all the way in to, and it's sad, but we would zoom it all the way in to watch his chest go up and down at
mm,
night. And we would do that several times. But, Caleb was waking up anywhere from, 3 to 4 times a night. So between sleeping, if we woke up, we could zoom that baby monitor all the way in so close that we could watch his chest rise and fall. And we talked about it, but we never got it. But they actually have pads that do something where if they stop breathing or whatever, they'll go off. Uh,
really?
yeah, we never ended up getting one, but they had those, and we had talked about getting those as well.
Hmm. So
So
let me ask you something else. Like as he began to get older, do you think it became more challenging or it became a little easier because you were getting used to having to deal with everything?
yeah, I think it got easier. Even though he still couldn't talk to us.
Mhm.
It was getting easier because we knew the signs. Like, we knew that, I'm sorry. We
You're fine.
knew that, if, he would do a certain thing when his seizure medication was not correct. He would do it's weird to explain, but he would do this thing and we were like, oh my gosh, he's having seizure again. We need to go back. But at first, when it was happening, we didn't know what was happening.
Mhm,
So it got easier in those aspects because we kind of knew, okay, this is what's going on with him here. Okay, he's doing this, he wants this.
mhm,
So we kind of grew to know, so it was easier. And I mean, he still was a special needs kid, but it was easier and we started to get into like a routine.
mhm.
Um, and yeah, I would say it actually got easier.
Okay. Now, when you say a routine, you mean like a daily routine or just like a routine overall with like knowing the signs and things like that?
I think both.
Okay.
So during the day, Caleb had to have medications certain times a day, and it had to
Mhm,
be spread out between the hours that we had. It had to be so many hours, I guess you can say.
mhm,
And so we had that routine down. We had getting him to his special needs daycare down. We had we took, I call it shift work. And
mhm,
this day he would wake up with Caleb. This day I would wake up with Caleb. And then just getting him to his doctor's appointments every 3.5 months, and because he had a bunch of different doctors. Um, it just got easier. And it was just a routine that we did. And I had this dry erase board that was up in the kitchen with his times for medication and what he needed to take. And um, not that we needed it after like the first couple of weeks, like we just knew
mhm.
what to give him. But I think it was some kind of something I could control at the time when it was total freaking chaos in our house.
Mhm.
So I think that's why we just kind of left it up there, even though we knew, even though we both knew what to give him and what
Yeah.
times to give it to him.
Yeah. Now, um, So let me ask you this. Do you think that would like, well, at that time, like, were you guys ever thinking about a second child, or was it just so, were you so overwhelmed?
We
Um,
were so overwhelmed, we never thought about another child.
mm,
Um, we I think and we would have been fine with that. We would have been fine with just Caleb. I mean, there was, um we didn't even think about it. I mean, there was so much, and we were so tired and we were so drained.
mm,
Um, I mean, I went down. I mean, it was stressful trying to figure it out. I mean, that's the simplest way to do it. There was absolutely no way we could have had another child at that time.
mm. So, like, with all the doctor's appointments and stuff like that, what would the doctor say? Would they say that he was doing well, or were there more surgeries that you guys were they talking about he needed, or was it kind of just like, how was it?
Um, they would do, different things. It just depended, what it was.
Mm,
So sometimes hold on a minute. Um, so basically sometimes he would, basically we would have to go and then it'd be like, well, let's do a swallow test. And that's when we found out that his flapper wasn't working correctly.
mm,
Um, and then sometimes we would go, we think he's still having seizures. They would do, a test on him, and you'd have to go do an overnight study, to check his brain waves. And
mm,
then, they, uh, cortical blindness, like we didn't know until we went to his first eye appointment, like he couldn't see, and we
mm,
we had no clue. So we had to do, they did all the testing for that and found out that he had cortical blindness and he was nearsighted. And they continue to do testing like that. They had to put tubes in his ear because he had really bad allergies, and to let his ears, drain because he kept getting ear infections. We had to have that done, and then we were actually, getting ready to get his adenoids taken out,
mm,
and because of all the problems he was having with allergies and stuff like that.
mm. So let me ask you this. So, like, with having Caleb and then your husband, is it being a possibility, like with him, like maybe being deployed, or and you guys both trying to work, did he have to take off like at all? And you be at home with your kid, me with your son?
Yeah, so he went on deployment, when I was pregnant with Caleb. He went on deployment for 3 months, and he
Mm,
was actually in, Africa, in Djibouti, and, so he did that, um, right before he kind of volunteered, so we would have a little while with Caleb before he would actually have to go back,
mhm,
overseas. But yes, I mean, if anything would have popped off, that would have been a possibility. Definitely
yeah.
would have.
So how did you manage, like, with being by yourself like that, with having a baby, and
Um,
trying to work?
it was rough, but I still had my parents here, and I
Mm,
had my family backing. As much as my mom was who she was, she still, would take care of Caleb at a drop of a hat. Not like what I would consider most grandparents did, but I mean, she would still take care of Caleb, as much as possible. So.
mm. So, I know that you said you guys were married for about 3 years. So, what caused your marriage to end?
So, and so we were living our life with Caleb,
Uh-huh.
starting in 2009. In 2000 and March of 2012, and it was our normal routine.
Mm,
In 2012, I woke up to Brian, screaming, and Caleb wasn't breathing.
mhm,
So I rushed downstairs, and Caleb ended up passing away. Um, the same exact thing that they said, one night he's gonna go to sleep and never wake up. And
ah,
so, that whole night, I think I'll play it over in my head, as much as anybody. I think I'll play it over for the rest of my life. But, basically, Brian had went the day before to go to, all Caleb's doctor's appointments that he had, every 3.5 months. He got a clean bill of health, and, that night, my mom or that day, my mom had actually tore up the TV remote. She had gotten it offline or whatever, and she asked me to come over and fix it, which I did. And I went over there, and Brian and Caleb were coming home from their doctor's appointments, and I was like, "Hey, just just go ahead and stop by my parents' house, let them see him for a minute." And so that's what they did, and they saw him for a few minutes, and then when we got home, which home is a quarter of a mile back, Caleb almost fell right to sleep. He was just so tired, I guess, from everything. And then that night at 4 a.m., Brian got up to change out his feeding tube or to change the bag where his food was, and he wasn't breathing. And
Wow.
then that started the whole, like, your mind is so weird. Like, in my mind, I was like, "He's gotta be joking," even though that's not something to joke about, but my mind was not allowing me to hear what he was saying.
Mhm.
And so, I went downstairs and, I dialed 911 because where we're from, if you dial 911 and throw down the phone, they still send police officers to your house. And so, I knew they would be coming even though no one was talking on the phone, and I ran into Caleb's room, and I told Brian to go grab the phone because he was hysterical, obviously. And, I got Caleb off the bed and started CPR on him until, they came, and the paramedics came and everything, took him to the hospital, and then obviously, Caleb passed away that night.
Wow, I'm so sorry for your loss.
Yeah, no problem.
Um, Now let me ask you this. Do you feel like, because I know that's really stressful, like that's something else. Do you feel like that is what was like started the proud like started, all the emotions and things like that may have started causing you guys to like distance from each other because it was so much going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it had a lot to do with it, but obviously, remember, I was the back even back then with his special needs. I was the one with like, yeah, let's push him as much as possible. He can do it. And Brian was like, wait a minute, they're saying he can't. Let's not overdo it. And then whenever obviously we started going through our grief, I wanted to be alone. I wanted to be by myself. I didn't want anybody around me. And I just fell into this dark hole, and Brian was more of a let's go and see, and he wanted to be with people. That was his way to help him grieve, I think, is to be around people and talk and everything. And I went the opposite direction. And I don't think it's anything that he did wrong.
Mhm.
But it was just a strain on me where I was like, I don't understand how you're grieving and how you're dealing with this.
Yeah.
And instead of talking, we grew apart even more, I think.
Yeah. And so you guys ended up getting a divorce. How long after all this happened did you guys end up getting a divorce?
Um, it, I mean, we were, mm, so when before Caleb passed away,
Hmm.
we were separated. So we had already separated a little bit. And then when Caleb died, I don't know if the divorce was final then or if it was final right after. I mean, it was right in there that we were divorced, and he got out of the military, and he ended up leaving, and he went back to Wisconsin.
Wow.
Mhm.
So with being by yourself, now let me ask you this. How like dealing with the loss of your son, what would grieve like how would you grieve, especially like being alone? What did grieving look like for you?
Mine was not eating. Mine was laying in bed.
Mm,
Um, I say my favorite fur baby. And it was just, I felt like I was so alone, and I felt like it was only me and no one understood what was going on with me.
mm,
I figured that nobody would know. I had tried one counseling session, but I'm an introvert at heart. So I did not want to do the group counseling. I did not want to do like the group therapy. I didn't want to do regular therapy because I didn't want to tell anybody and be in a large group of people.
mm,
So it was just me, I say, spiraling down and having to deal with I say obviously my loss, but at the time too, like, um, I had this thing in my head that I was like, man, I just suck. I just suck as a person. And that's when, oh my God, I don't have anybody. My son's gone, the only thing that I really cared about. And um, yeah, I just started spiraling down and down and down. And any demon you can possibly think of came out, you know. You're dealing with your grief, and then that just puts your emotions and your mind on high. And then in came all this other stuff. So I was like, I was in such a low place where I went back to work pretty early, but I was in such a bad place where it was like, I don't want to commit suicide, but if something happened to me, I'd be okay with it. If I died, I'd be okay with it. And I was doing stupid things in my law enforcement career, knowing that this is not good to do and I could
Mhm,
die at any minute. This is just unsafe. And I
mhm,
was doing that stuff, but I didn't care. I
mhm.
was at the point where I was like, I don't care. If something happened to me, oh well, I'll be with Caleb, you know. And I was just at that place for a really, really long time.
So how did you manage to come out of that?
Well, I was divorced from Brian,
Uh-huh.
and I one day I was just sitting on my couch with my dog, and you know, I just knew I was thinking about everything, thinking about my life and just how I just did not enjoy it, um and just where I was. And I just decided that, I'm not going to live the next 30, 40, 50 years like this. And that was the start of me deciding to change my life. But one day I made that decision, and it wasn't soon into it. It was probably 6 months to a year into it.
Because like with grief, um, I think like when we lose someone, it's a difference between you when you lose someone that you know and when you lose someone that you really love. And
Mhm.
I feel like when you do have that loss take place, of like part of you kind of dies with that person. And to really get out of that, like you have to want to,
Yeah.
because it's so easy to like to kind of die and stay there.
Hmm.
So to make the intentional decision every single day, um, and it I'm not gonna say like the loss gets easier because it's still bad days like down the line. It's just you
Hmm.
learn how to live with it. And it's okay to like keep the memory of that person alive, but you just have to learn how to like actually get up and keep pushing with that, make it a part of you because Caleb is always going to be a part of your story, so it's not really like moving on without that person, but kind of like taking that person with you and still living. um
Right. The women, and you're exactly, I think you hit it perfectly because people say, "Oh, well, you'll heal," but really, you don't heal. And then I tell all the women that have lost a child that I know, you don't heal. You learn how to deal with it, and you dealing with it. It depends on the specific person. There's a lot of things that people can do that some people works for a lot of people, and some it doesn't. But you have to, when you set in your mind that I want to be a better person, or I want to be, you know, learn how to deal with this, you have to be steadfast with that. You can't say, "Okay, one day I'm gonna do it and one day I'm not."
mhm,
Um, and I think you hit another point really, and it's spot on, is that person is always a part of you. And I tell the women that I work with, "Look, you know, your life totally is a book, and each specific thing in life you is a chapter." And for me, my son was the main character in a lot of my chapters. Now, even though he is gone, he still is a character in my book. What makes up that book, what makes up me, my journey, he's still a part of it. And I'm not going to just go rip those chapters out just because he's gone. He always stays with me, and he's always going to be with me for the rest of my life. And now, obviously I'm married again, and I actually have a daughter, which I think God knew what he was doing when he did that, because I will never be able to compare the two.
mhm.
But she's my main character right now. Her and my husband are my main character, And but she still knows about Caleb because he is part of my history.
Mhm,
And I'm never going to deny my husband now, Josh, and I'm never going to deny Bella, Caleb. They
mhm,
will always know him because it's part of what makes me me. And I always tell Bella that Caleb Caleb made me a better mom, you
mhm,
know. And then I always tell Bella that she saved my life. I'm like, you saved my life, you know. And she doesn't understand that now. She's only 9,
mhm.
but you know, I think they live on within you, and you will always if you always honor them. The one thing we fear the most, that these special people are going to be forgotten. They're never forgotten because you're always honoring them in your life. You're always talking to them. They're always with you, and they're always around you in conversation. And you don't talk about the bad times. You know, the death obviously is a bad time. And for anybody that's grieving, the last memory you have of a person is always going to be that death. So like with Caleb for a long time, the memory that I remember the most was the death because that was the newest memory. But I had to train my mind to think about all the other things. So basically, when we're talking about our loss and we're talking about loved ones that have passed away, what we do now is we talk about the happy times. Yeah, they did pass away. That was a horrible time, but why talk about the horrible times when you can talk about all these happy times in their memory? And that's the way we keep them alive, remembering the good times, the funny times, the stuff that was off the wall that we did with them. That's what you
Yeah,
remember.
absolutely. And you know what? Honestly, that's been one thing that helped me, like now that I'm in a space of healing, deal with the
Mhm.
loss of my mom, like to think about all instead of concentrating and fixating my attention on the fact that she's gone, like think about all the time that I did have with her,
Mhm.
and all the memories that we got to be able to create and just the different experiences that we had, instead of like sitting and resting on the fact. I mean, because death it's inevitable, and we never know like when we're gonna go, but we all do have to go.
Yeah.
So um at first accepting that, and then also like just thinking about all the times that I did have with her and all the memories that we
Yeah.
did get to share.
Mhm.
And just like now that I know, I have to it's okay to like have rough days, have even a bad week, or whatever, but I can't rest there. I can't
Mhm.
just rest there because I still have to do life. um
Mhm.
and also like there's different people that need my experiences to help them with their life.
Right.
um so I know you mentioned something about the women that you work with. So what type of like have you taken that experience and are you using it now to help other people?
Mhm. So after I always tell people, and what I had to do with my life is I had to rebuild my life to what the way I wanted it to be, and I had to find a purpose because that was the biggest thing with me was I was not the same person I used to be. I had to learn that I could never go back to that life I was living before. It was a trauma, and that's with any trauma in your life, you're never that same person. And I had to rebuild my life and find out what my purpose was. 'Cause really, I mean, I was doing law enforcement and I was doing all these things, but I felt like that I should be doing more and could be more. And so, for me, it was starting to help those women, other women that have lost children. And obviously, I would see when it doesn't happen to you, you don't know. But as soon as obviously I lost my child, then I was seeing all these women that I knew and that I could help. So I started helping them, and then so now I actually help other women that have lost a child start to rebuild their life and find a purpose, whatever their purpose looks like. Obviously, my purpose is going to be different than theirs. Their purpose might be to be better moms or to their other children or whatever it is. And I help them. And I actually, my book is getting ready to be released June 16th. I wrote a book about my whole experience with it, and my hope in writing it because I always tell I've been telling my family and friends I'm like, well, the 16th you're gonna be able to see how crazy I really am. Um, just because I wrote it very raw and what I was feeling at that time, what my mind was telling me.
Mhm.
And I wrote about it all in there just to hopefully help other women not think that they're so wrong for feeling the way they are. And It's great. So I did that, and then I coach women, and then I have a Facebook group just for women that have lost a child, just so I can talk to them and try to help them and guide them. And I do like monthly question and answers. Like if you have a question about something, I get on a Zoom meeting with these women, and it's like you don't have to show your face, just give me a question. And if you don't want to be open about it, you can send it to me, private message me and tell me, and I'll talk about it. If you feel insecure about talking about it in a group setting and you don't want to, you just want it answered. So I started doing a lot of these things, and I mean, there's still things in the works that I want to do, but yeah, that once I started, I felt the urge that I should be doing this, and once I did, um, like it's just kind of skyrocketed since then. But I started at just helping people, seeing people on Facebook that I knew losing kids, talking to them and telling them what I went through.
That's awesome. So, like being getting remarried after the loss of your son, like, did you like how has your husband, and you guys are still married, right?
Mhm. Yep,
Okay.
we're still married.
Okay, good. Um
Glad
how
you finally did
have
it.
no, I'm happy for you. That's amazing. How has he helped you cope? And is he like really supportive? Like what does that look like since then?
Yeah, so when Josh has never experienced child loss. He has never experienced having a special needs kid.
Mhm.
Both Bella and his older son are both very healthy. Nothing's ever been wrong with them. He listens. He's a very good listener, and he remembers, like, his death date and his birthday,
Aw.
he knows, he remembers. And, we're both in law enforcement, so he's kinda like, "I know what day it is. If you need anything, let me know," because he knows he doesn't wanna bother me with it, and just because he knows I'm a very, s step back type person. Like, sometimes I just need to deal with stuff by myself. But he's very supportive. I actually didn't tell him I was writing a book until a month before I sent it to the editor, and I'm like, "Yeah, I wrote a book," and he's like, "Oh, you wrote a children's book?" Because I had told him that I thought that would be cool a long time ago to write a children's book. And I was like, "No, I wrote a book about my experience," and he just kinda looks at me like, "Why didn't you tell me?" And I was like, "Well, I didn't know how well it was gonna go." And, so he's been very supportive, and he knows when I have my bad days that, he'll ask me, "Hey, what's going on?" And he knows to step back if I don't wanna talk about it. But he's been really supportive of it. Um, Bella, she knows about it too, obviously. My daughter knows about it, and, she'll come with some off the wall stuff sometimes, and, he kinda tries to explain it the best way he can.
Mhm.
But yeah, he's real supportive with it. He doesn't understand child loss, but he still listens. And he's one of those people that say, "I can't imagine ever going through that," which I'm like, "Don't ever say that again." But,
Yeah.
you know, he understands to an extent, and that's all he knows.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. When you got pregnant with your second child, and that's truly a blessing, like God is something else.
Yeah.
Um, were you really scared the second pregnancy because of the way the first one had went?
Absolutely. I was scared to death. So, like, she was my oops baby. I call her my oops baby.
Mhm.
The best oops I've ever had in my life. Yeah, I was extremely scared. At 35 weeks, I started having the same, or at 34 weeks, I started having the same thing again.
Mhm.
And we kind of dealt with it until 35 and some change weeks again.
Mhm.
And I had started preterm labor, and they had me in the hospital, and they wanted to stop my pregnancy. And it was at that point that I looked at Josh and was like, "I'm not leaving this hospital without having him. I'm not doing this again." And I truly believe that you always know what's best for you. And I was like, "Josh, I'm not leaving this hospital. I'm not doing this again. I'm not going through it." I started freaking out. And the nurse that was there was really, really cool. And she was like, okay, we're gonna have this baby today. And so I ended up having a C-section and had Bella. And but yeah, it was scary because it was fine up until about 34 weeks, and oh God, here we go, we're starting the problems again.
Mhm.
And that was extremely scary for me. It was. I was a basket case, the whole time. And
Yeah.
then, I can still remember, obviously, the first time I wasn't up because they had knocked me out because it was an emergency C-section. But the second time I was up and, like, I was freaking out then. I was like, why aren't they crying? Why did the, I'm asking Brian a bunch of, not Brian, excuse me, Josh, a bunch of questions like, what's going on? And he was just like, June, calm down. It's just like, calm down. Everything's fine. I mean, and obviously he's peering over the side, but I can't, you're just, kind of strapped down and just waiting. And finally, when she cried, I knew everything was going to be fine. But yeah, even up until the day that I was in there and they were doing the C-section, I was freaking out, you
Yeah.
know?
And you know what? It's one thing that my mom always told me, like, when it comes to the doctors and it comes to your body, like, it doesn't matter what the doctor says. Like, if it
Mhm.
does not feel right for you, like,
Mhm.
always follow, your inner thought. Like, if it does
Yeah.
not feel right, or if it does feel right, follow what you feel. So I'm
Mhm.
glad you got to deliver her. And she was healthy and all that. Now let
Yeah.
me ask you something else. Like when with having another baby, did that ever put you in a bad space mentally? Because of how things went with Caleb?
Um, no, I don't think it put me in a bad headspace.
Mhm,
But I will say, well, let me rephrase that. In the beginning, I feared her being taken away from me like Caleb.
mhm,
So the first few weeks that she was born, I was very standoffish. I was scared to get attached to her and then her die too.
mhm.
And that's just being real. And I think anybody that experiences the trauma of losing a child and having to go through, another baby, um, it terrorized me.
Mhm.
But, I think it gets to a point where your child, just the laughing and the looks, and you can tell how much they love you, even as like a little newborn, you can't help but love them and get over that. But I did have that fear. And, you know, I don't think that goes away. I don't think that would ever go away. But, even to this day, I have to check myself because I am so overprotective of Bella. It's
Mhm.
crazy.
Yeah.
Oh no, you're not going there because something could happen. Or oh no, you can't go there. And I already had that. I already had
Mhm.
that being in law enforcement because of what I've seen and cases I've worked. But I have it also because she's my only child here.
Mhm.
I have another child in heaven, but she's the only one here. And I think that also plays a role in how overprotective I am. And I have to check myself and say, okay, you gotta let her do, or when she gets older, she's
Yeah.
gonna resent it, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And you know what? It's really hard to like take a step back, even because like with my son, he's 7, and I want to just like
Hmm.
be there, be on top of him. No, you can't go. No, you can't do. You might hurt yourself. You might this, that, and the other. But
Hmm.
it's like I gotta fall back and let him learn, life on his own for himself. Because, like you said, he may end up resenting it. Um, and I just don't want him to be handicapped as far as like how to like as far as like knowing how to conduct himself and carry himself, like instead of versus me trying to be like protective, but really in the end, what I'm screwing him up, because I want him to be able to know how to do things,
Hmm.
it's so hard. That's probably one of the hardest decisions that we have to make as parents,
Yeah.
but I'm really, man, that's such a blessing. That's such a blessing that God gave you another kid.
Hmm.
And you still can have that memory of Caleb, and that she knows who he is, and that you have a
Hmm.
supportive husband, and I'm so happy for you.
Thank you.
Um, and so let me ask you one more thing. So what does life look like for you now? I know you said you're still in law enforcement and you help women,
Hmm.
and you're getting ready to launch your book June
Hmm.
16th. Um, so what other things are you working on?
So right now I'm still full-time law enforcement, obviously, and then eventually I would love to just work with women. But right now I'm just working with women. I have a group and I have that monthly. And then this, starting in June, what I'm going to start doing is the program that I have for coaching, because I'm going back to one-on-one coaching. So the program, that group program I had for coaching for women that have lost a child, I'm getting ready to start release that into the private group that we have so that that can start happening. And that's coming up in June. And then yeah, obviously my book's coming out, and I have some more things in the works. And I started a little shop with just merch in it where, it's inspirational and motivational stuff. And yeah, I'm about to start actually my own little podcast where 10-15 minutes of just inspirational, motivational, something for a woman, once a week to live by for that week. I'm getting ready to start that. I don't know when I'm going to start that yet. I'm waiting for the book to be released, and then the program to start coming out in the private group, and then we're just going to kind of go from there.
Okay.
See how much time I have.
Oh yeah, you're doing a lot of stuff, a lot of great
Yeah.
work. That's amazing. So, one more thing before we close out. So, if people want to find you or find your book or find your Facebook group, how can we find you?
Sure. So, my website is Life After Child. So anybody can go there. It's actually just been revamped. So you can Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram. There's obviously links on there. But if you want to get into my actual private group with just other moms who have lost a child, then that is actually on Facebook, and it's at Women Surviving Child Loss. But everything else can be accessed through my website, which is Life After Child. You can get my book there. There's links there that you can link up to get my book. And then if you want to know about coaching, one-on-one coaching, it's there. And obviously the merch, if you want any merch, it's there.
Okay, that's great. Well, I appreciate you spending time with us here on the show, and I appreciate you being open about your experiences and about your story in hopes of helping other people that are going through the same thing or something similar. What you're doing is absolutely amazing.
I appreciate you.
Using you turned your pain into passion, like, and purpose, like, and that's amazing. So I
Yeah,
appreciate you.
thank you.
Um, no problem. And you're welcome on the show anytime, like anytime.
Yeah. Yeah, we need to do it again. There's like so many different things you can talk about. It's, especially when it deals with grief, just in general and grief. We
Mhm,
should, we definitely
absolutely.
should.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on Let the Healing Begin podcast. Please head over to www.greatergrowthllc.com and support the t-shirt and hoodie store. And also head over to Amazon and grab a copy of the book called Back in My Day. It is by Asia Wilson. Thank you so much, and until next time.